At 48, the tragedy of Tom Brady is not defined by defeat, scandal, or public collapse. It is far more unsettling than that. It is the tragedy of a man who reached the absolute summit of greatness and then discovered that the view from the top can be painfully quiet. For more than 2 decades, Tom Brady lived inside a world governed by precision, discipline, and relentless expectation. Every season followed a rhythm: training camps, game plans, film sessions, pressure, redemption, and glory. While other athletes came and went, Brady endured. He rewrote records not through raw talent alone, but through obsession, an almost ruthless commitment to being better tomorrow than he was yesterday. That mindset built a legend. It also built a life with very little room for stillness. To fans, Brady's career looked like a perfect equation. Sacrifice equaled success. Work ethic equaled immortality. 7 Super Bowl rings seemed to confirm that formula beyond question. Yet what the numbers never captured was how much of his identity became fused to the game itself. Football was not simply something he did. It was the structure around which his entire existence was organized. Every decision, every routine, every priority bent towards Sunday. As the years passed, Brady did what few believed possible. He outlasted rivals, doubters, even time itself. When his body should have slowed, he refined it. When the league evolved, he adapted. Retirement rumors followed him like shadows, but he kept stepping back onto the field, chasing not just victory, but relevance. Proof that his purpose still mattered. And for a long time it did. But even legends cannot outrun the passage of time forever. When Brady finally stepped away, the silence that followed was not relief. It was exposure. Without the constant demands of preparation and performance, he was left face to face with a question he had postponed for decades. Who is Tom Brady without football? That question did not arrive gently. It came layered with consequences. His personal life, long praised as a symbol of balance, revealed fractures that had quietly formed over years. There was no explosive betrayal, no tabloid chaos. Instead, there was something far more heartbreaking: the realization that presence cannot be postponed indefinitely. Time, once spent, cannot be reclaimed, no matter how successful the career. Brady has spoken sparingly about this period, but when he does, his words carry weight. He does not blame the sport. He does not frame himself as a victim. Instead, he acknowledges something deeply uncomfortable: that devotion, when left unchecked, can slowly crowd out everything else. Football rewarded him endlessly. Life was less forgiving. What makes his story resonate so powerfully is its universality. Strip away the fame, the wealth, the championships, and what remains is a man grappling with transition, with aging, with the loss of an identity that once gave everyday meaning. Brady spent his life mastering how to win. No one taught him how to stop. At 48, his body bears the marks of a career fought at the highest level. His mind carries the discipline of a champion. But his heart is navigating unfamiliar territory, a world without a scoreboard, without a clear opponent, without the certainty of what comes next. For the first time, effort does not guarantee outcome. This is the quiet tragedy at the center of Tom Brady's story. Not that he failed, but that he succeeded so completely that there was nowhere left to go. Greatness gave him everything he was promised, and still left questions unanswered. In the end, Brady's journey forces an uncomfortable reflection. If the greatest of all time can reach the pinnacle and still feel unanchored, what does that say about how we define success? About what we are willing to trade for it? This is not the end of Tom Brady's story, but it is the moment where the illusion cracks, where legacy and reality collide, and where even a legend must confront the cost of becoming unforgettable. As the noise of the stadium faded from his life, Tom Brady entered a chapter far more difficult than any fourth-quarter comeback. This was not a battle against defenders or doubt from analysts. It was a confrontation with emptiness, the kind that arrives quietly and refuses to leave. For years, Brady had lived with certainty. Every season brought a goal. Every week brought urgency. Win or lose, there was always another snap, another film session, another chance to correct mistakes. Retirement stripped that structure away. Days became open-ended. Time, once rationed with military precision, suddenly stretched without direction. For a man conditioned to constant purpose, that freedom felt more like disorientation. Friends and former teammates noticed the shift. Brady remained disciplined, still chasing peak physical condition, still holding himself to impossible standards. But the question lingered beneath the surface. What was all this preparation for now? Without an opponent to face, the rituals that once fueled him began to feel hollow. Training without a season ahead was no longer ambition. It was habit clinging to relevance. The emotional weight grew heavier as Brady reflected on what his career demanded beyond his own body. Football did not only take hits and bruises, it took moments. Birthdays spent away, conversations postponed, relationships managed around schedules that never truly slowed. For years, he believed those sacrifices were temporary, that there would be time later. Later, however, arrived without the guarantees he expected. His marriage, long viewed as resilient under pressure, became a symbol of that realization. There was no villain, no dramatic unraveling, just two lives that had gradually grown in different rhythms. Brady's devotion to football was never a secret. But devotion, he learned too late, does not always feel like love to the people waiting at home. Even understanding has limits. What makes this period so tragic is Brady's clarity. He understands exactly how he got here. He does not hide behind denial or excuses. In rare moments of honesty, he has admitted that the same mindset that made him the greatest quarterback of all time also made balance nearly impossible. Greatness demands obsession. Obsession demands sacrifice. And sacrifice eventually demands payment. Publicly, Brady continues to project control. He speaks thoughtfully about legacy, about gratitude, about embracing change. But beneath that composed exterior lies a man navigating grief, not for something lost in a single moment, but for years that slipped by unnoticed while he was becoming a legend. This is not regret in the dramatic sense. It is something quieter, more persistent. An awareness that certain versions of life are no longer accessible. At 48, Brady stands at a crossroads few can relate to. There is no higher peak left to climb in football, no record left to chase that would redefine him. For the first time, success is no longer measurable. There is no scoreboard to confirm progress, no championship to validate effort. The skills that carried him to immortality offer no roadmap for fulfillment beyond the game. And yet, there's something profoundly human in this struggle. Brady's tragedy is not unique to fame. It echoes in anyone who has poured everything into one pursuit, believing it would one day deliver completeness. His story forces a difficult question. What happens when your life's purpose expires before you do? This chapter is not about downfall. It is about transition, the most unforgiving phase of all. Reinvention requires vulnerability, and vulnerability has never been Brady's comfort zone. On the field, uncertainty could be solved with preparation. In life, there are no playbooks. As he looks ahead, Brady faces the task of redefining success on unfamiliar terms. Not by winning, but by connecting. Not by pushing harder, but by being present. These are battles no one trained him for, and victories here offer no public applause. The tragedy of Tom Brady at 48 is not that the game ended. It is that the game gave him everything and still left him searching for meaning when it was over. Even as the glare of stadium lights faded, the echo of expectations lingered relentlessly in Tom Brady's mind. For decades, he had been conditioned to respond to pressure, to thrive under scrutiny, and to define himself by measurable outcomes, touchdowns, wins, rings. But now, at 48, he faced a different arena, one without clear metrics, one where the opponent was neither visible nor quantifiable. He had become a man unarmed, standing in a quiet, unfamiliar battlefield, life after the game. Brady's physical condition remained impeccable, the product of years of unmatched discipline. Yet his body, though strong, could no longer provide the same validation it once had. The hours spent in the weight room and on the practice field no longer translated to victories. They translated only to self-discipline, to a mirror reflecting a man searching for a new identity. Every routine that once provided purpose now threatened to highlight what was missing: connection, spontaneity, and the intimacy of unstructured time. The hardest lessons came quietly, in moments most invisible to the public eye. Early mornings once devoted to film review or conditioning became a mirror of solitude. Weekends once consumed by games and media attention became a landscape of silence. Social media, always a source of acclaim and scrutiny, became a reminder that while millions celebrated his legacy, there was little space for empathy regarding the personal toll of his journey. Achievements that once defined him now emphasized the cost of everything else deferred. Family life, which had been carefully orchestrated to coexist with a demanding career, began to reveal the weight of years postponed. Brady had always loved deeply, but love requires presence as much as intention. There were conversations left unsaid, small moments missed, birthdays overshadowed by game day logistics. Hindsight revealed a pattern. The relentless chase for excellence often unintentionally created emotional distance. And in that distance, he discovered a subtle, lingering sorrow that no championship or accolade could erase. Even within the framework of his marriage, Brady confronted truths he could not ignore. There was no scandal, no betrayal, only the quiet recognition that two people, however devoted, could drift when their lives are dictated by different rhythms. The realization was stark. Success in one domain does not guarantee balance in another. The very traits that propelled him to greatness, determination, focus, discipline, also exacted a toll that could not be measured in statistics. Some victories, it seemed, came with a hidden price tag. Away from the public eye, Brady wrestled with identity. Without football structure, the defining question of his existence loomed larger than any defense he had faced. Who is Tom Brady when the scoreboard no longer counts? His answer was neither simple nor reassuring. Legacy remained intact. History would remember him as one of the greatest to ever play the game. But legacy does not provide comfort at night. Legacy does not replace the feeling of being needed in ways unrelated to performance or fame. And for someone whose life had been carefully engineered around purpose and achievement, this new void felt almost inescapable. Brady's reflections extended beyond personal regret. He understood that his experience was not isolated. It mirrored the struggles of anyone who has devoted themselves entirely to a singular pursuit. Ambition, no matter how noble, exacts its own form of sacrifice. The brilliance of achievement cannot always compensate for moments lost, relationships deferred, or the subtle erosion of connection that happens when life is lived in pursuit of external validation. Even greatness cannot bend time, and even the most disciplined mind cannot recover the past. And yet, amid the melancholy, there remained a faint spark of possibility. Brady recognized that this was also an opportunity, a chance to redefine himself beyond statistics, trophies, or public perception. He could explore dimensions of life that had been sidelined for decades: family, friendships, introspection, and even the quiet joy of mundane routines. But this path required patience, humility, and a willingness to confront vulnerability, terrain as unfamiliar as any stadium he had ever entered. At 48, Tom Brady's tragedy is profoundly human. It is not a story of scandal, failure, or defeat. It is a story of triumph intertwined with cost, of a man who gave everything to his calling and now must reckon with what that devotion truly demanded. It is the paradox of achievement. The higher one climbs, the further one may drift from the things that matter most. And in that space between greatness and fulfillment, Brady navigates a journey that is at once inspiring and heartbreakingly relatable. In the silence that follows his final season, the lessons are clear, if painful. Victory is not always synonymous with happiness. Legacy is not a substitute for presence. And even those who seem to have everything may carry burdens unseen by the world. The quiet, persistent ache of life fully lived in pursuit of dreams that cannot answer back. For Tom Brady, the game may have ended, but the most profound challenge of all is only beginning. Even as Tom Brady stepped away from the roar of stadiums, the world attention never truly left him. Retirement brought a paradoxical freedom, yet it also carried a new kind of scrutiny. Every social media post, every public appearance, every interview became a lens through which millions tried to define him. The spotlight had changed form, from Friday night games to 24-hour news cycles, from highlight reels to dissected Instagram stories. The public still measured him, still expected brilliance, and still questioned whether he could navigate life without the game. The arena had not disappeared. It had merely moved online. The financial rewards of his career were extraordinary. Multi-million-dollar contracts, endorsement deals, and investments had secured a future beyond what most could imagine. Yet even the security of wealth could not shield him from the emptiness that accompanied time spent chasing perfection. Money bought comfort, but it could not reclaim the years lost to travel, to grueling training, to endless repetition. Even surrounded by luxury, Brady faced the quiet question, what is the value of everything if it cannot restore the moments that truly matter? Fans, too, presented their own kind of challenge. He had once been their hero, their standard of greatness, the embodiment of a dream they all shared. Now, they looked to him for commentary, for continued inspiration, for validation of their devotion. Their admiration was unwavering, but admiration can be isolating. It elevates the admired while keeping them at a distance, even from those closest to them. Brady felt the weight of being larger than life, unable to escape the identity he had spent decades cultivating. Media narratives compounded this isolation. Headlines celebrated his victories, speculated on his personal life, and dissected his every move. Even well-meaning coverage carried implicit expectations. Maintain composure, remain inspiring, show balance. But beneath the curated appearances, he was navigating emotions that could not be televised. The human cost of fame, the quiet grief, the subtle regrets, the longing for unstructured time, existed in spaces the public never saw. And yet, every news story reminded him that the world had a stake in his persona, even as it could not participate in his healing. Brady confronted another truth. Identity built solely on achievement is fragile. He had been the greatest quarterback of his generation, a man whose name was synonymous with excellence. But when the game ended, that identity required reinvention. Who is Tom Brady without the plays, the defenses, the Super Bowl rings? The answer was neither simple nor complete. It demanded reflection, vulnerability, and courage, qualities honed in private, far from cameras and acclaim. Family remained both sanctuary and challenge. Brady's devotion to his children, his spouse, and his inner circle became a priority, yet these relationships required presence, patience, and attention, qualities that decades of career obsession had sometimes made difficult. Relearning intimacy outside of football, navigating parenthood without distraction, and rebuilding connections strained by absence were all challenges he faced quietly. Unlike the stadium, life at home offered no clear rules, no game plan, no way to win with certainty. Every day demanded improvisation, empathy, and understanding. At 48, Brady also confronted mortality and legacy in new ways. The physical strain of years on the field had left subtle marks, and he understood the body he once trusted implicitly would not last forever. The future was a horizon without predictability. The question of what he would leave behind, not in statistics, but in memory, influence, and example, became urgent. Achievements could inspire, but they could not provide the intimacy, joy, and connection that define human life. He recognized the stark difference between being remembered and being truly present in the lives of those he loved. Through this reflection, the tragedy of Tom Brady's life at 48 becomes clearer. It is not a story of failure, scandal, or downfall. It is the story of a man who gave everything to his calling, achieved everything the world could measure, and yet confronted an inner landscape defined by absence, expectation, and quiet longing. It is a reminder that greatness, even when attained, carries costs unseen, and that fulfillment often requires confronting the parts of life that cannot be quantified, sold, or celebrated publicly. Brady's journey continues, but the lessons are stark. Legacy is a reflection of effort and excellence, but it does not replace presence. Wealth can provide comfort, but not connection. Fame can amplify influence, but not intimacy. And for a man who spent decades mastering football, the hardest opponent of all may be himself. Learning how to live fully in a world where victory is no longer measured in touchdowns, rings, or accolades. Even surrounded by accolades, wealth, and a lifetime of public adoration, Tom Brady at 48 discovered a truth few could have predicted. Greatness does not inoculate you from loneliness. The very qualities that built his legend, discipline, focus, and relentless ambition, now threatened to isolate him from the life he had postponed for decades. On paper, he had everything: family, fortune, fame. But reality, stripped of cheers and scoreboard validation, was quieter, emptier, and far more demanding. The stadiums were empty, yet the echoes of expectation persisted. Social media feeds, headlines, and fan speculation became a constant backdrop, a reminder that the world still measured him by the standards he once used to measure himself. Praise could feel hollow when it was never truly reciprocal. The admiration of millions, once a source of energy and affirmation, now sometimes felt like a barrier, a glass wall separating him from genuine human connection. To be loved for a persona is different from being understood for the person behind it. Brady's internal struggle extended beyond public scrutiny. There was the subtle ache of missed experiences, the birthdays and small moments sacrificed to a career that demanded everything. The victories that once thrilled him now existed primarily in memory, trophies gleaming but silent. And memory, while comforting, is a poor substitute for living. Each reflection brought a mixture of pride and quiet grief. Pride for a career unmatched, grief for the intangible costs of obsession. Family offered solace, yet also posed its own challenges. Brady had devoted decades to his craft, and now had to recalibrate how to be present in ways previously deferred. Children, spouses, and friends required attention and patience. Elements of life he had long subordinated to training, games, and preparation. Love, he realized, demands not only intention but presence, something fame and discipline could not always guarantee. The realization was humbling, even for a man used to mastery. Media scrutiny intensified these pressures. Every appearance, interview, or public statement was dissected, evaluated, and amplified. Even minor choices, what he wore, where he vacationed, how he spoke, became a narrative for millions. The constant analysis created a paradox. He was simultaneously revered and trapped, celebrated and scrutinized, admired and misunderstood. Even as he sought authenticity and quiet reflection, the world's gaze often obstructed those very moments. The psychological toll was subtle yet profound. Success had defined him for decades. Without football, he confronted questions he had postponed for too long. Who is Tom Brady when no one is keeping score? What does purpose mean when it cannot be measured in wins? How do you define relevance when the metrics you have relied on your entire life no longer apply? These were not trivial inquiries. They struck at the core of identity, forcing introspection and self-confrontation at a scale few could comprehend. Even with wealth and influence, Brady faced the universal human struggle, the need to find meaning beyond external achievement. The rings, records, and contracts could not teach him how to navigate solitude, emotional intimacy, or the passage of time now that his career structure was gone. In these moments, he discovered that even the greatest triumphs cannot shield against the complexity of human experience, the subtle griefs, the unseen sacrifices, and the persistent ache of what might have been. Yet there remained a glimmer of hope. Brady's awareness of these challenges signaled the possibility of reinvention. The same qualities that had driven him to excellence, focus, resilience, and dedication, could now guide him in mastering life off the field. His journey, while profoundly human in its trials, was also an opportunity to redefine success, to seek fulfillment in presence, connection, and authenticity rather than in public accolades. But that path required patience, humility, and courage, the very traits tested most when the world is silent and only truth remains. The tragedy of Tom Brady at 48 is not found in defeat, failure, or scandal. It is found in the quiet realization that even a life of unparalleled success carries costs invisible to the world: the cost of time, intimacy, identity, and presence. And perhaps the most haunting truth is this: while the public remembers triumphs and records, the private moments, the subtle losses, the deferred conversations, the solitude of reflection, are the moments that define a human life. Brady's story reminds us all that achievement alone cannot guarantee fulfillment, that greatness demands sacrifices that money, fame, and admiration cannot repay, and that the most profound victories are often internal. Learning to reconcile ambition with humanity, legacy with presence, and accomplishment with authentic connection. At 48, Tom Brady faces this ultimate challenge, a test of character that extends far beyond football, one that few can see and even fewer can imagine enduring. As Tom Brady navigates life beyond football, a new chapter unfolds, one defined not by touchdowns or championships, but by introspection and reconciliation. At 48, he confronts the paradox of his existence, a life of unparalleled achievement intertwined with the subtle, persistent sorrow of moments deferred, relationships postponed, and the quiet toll of relentless ambition. Yet within this paradox lies the opportunity for transformation, a chance to redefine purpose and find meaning in ways that were impossible while the stadium lights burn bright. The lessons of his career remain, etched into muscle memory and psyche alike: discipline, focus, resilience, and an unyielding drive to excel. But now, these qualities must be repurposed. The opponent is no longer an opposing defense, but the challenge of life lived fully, deliberately, and with presence. Every day requires intention. Every interaction demands authenticity. In this arena, victories are not measured in stats or rings, but in connections nurtured, moments savored, and the quiet satisfaction of living intentionally. Family, once navigated around the demands of a rigorous schedule, now becomes central. Brady invests time and energy into relationships previously sacrificed at the altar of ambition. Conversations once deferred are reclaimed. Shared experiences from the ordinary to the extraordinary gain new weight. He discovers that love, presence, and empathy, not public acclaim or performance, are the true measures of fulfillment. The hardest opponent of all, the self, can now be confronted with honesty, compassion, and intentionality. Public perception continues to shadow him, yet Brady's understanding of legacy has evolved. He realizes that being remembered is less about the awe of fans or the glow of media coverage and more about the subtle, enduring impact he leaves on those who know him intimately. Every gesture of care, every moment of mentorship, every decision guided by conscience becomes part of a legacy that transcends statistics. In this realization, he begins to reconcile with the costs of his past choices, understanding that mistakes, sacrifice, and loss are inseparable from greatness. Even his physical prowess, once a defining pillar of identity, is reframed. Fitness and discipline are no longer just tools for competition. They are avenues for longevity, vitality, and self-respect. The body, once a vessel of performance, becomes a partner in life, a reminder of resilience and the capacity to endure, heal, and adapt. This recalibration is subtle but profound. Mastery of the body now supports mastery of life itself, not merely athletic achievement. The pressures of fame and expectation remain, yet Brady's relationship to them transforms. Where once the gaze of millions dictated self-worth, he now filters attention through clarity and discernment. He engages with the world intentionally, choosing moments of visibility not for validation, but for meaningful connection. The applause is no longer essential. The understanding that personal growth and fulfillment exist beyond public recognition offers an unexpected liberation. At 48, the tragedy that once defined Tom Brady's post-career narrative begins to shift toward possibility. The solitude that felt oppressive transforms into reflection, the reflection into insight, and the insight into action. He learns to navigate life with the same strategic precision that defined his career, applying focus and discipline not to yards gained, but to moments experienced, relationships deepened, and self-understanding cultivated. This evolution does not erase the past or diminish the sacrifices made. Rather, it reframes them. Every lost birthday, every deferred conversation, every hour spent in pursuit of excellence now informs a wiser, more compassionate approach to life. The man who once measured success by trophies now measures it by authenticity, presence, and the subtle joys of existence that no record can capture. In the end, Tom Brady's journey at 48 is a study in human complexity. It is a story of triumph and loss, ambition and introspection, public adulation and private reckoning. It is a reminder that even the greatest can face profound challenges when external markers of success fade. Yet it is also a story of hope, that even after the highest peaks are scaled, there is room for growth, connection, and purpose. That fulfillment, while elusive, is attainable through courage, reflection, and the conscious choice to live fully. Brady's legacy, therefore, is twofold. The legend celebrated on fields across the world, and the man who, in quiet reflection, confronts his past, embraces his humanity, and seeks meaning beyond the scoreboard. This is the final truth of Tom Brady at 48, a life of brilliance, sacrifice, and reconciliation, where the greatest victories may no longer be visible, but they are no less profound. Even with a life adorned with accolades, fortune, and fame, Tom Brady discovered that the absence of the game left a vacuum impossible to fill with trophies or recognition alone. The stadiums that once roared for him were silent, yet the expectations persisted, echoing through social media, interviews, and fan speculation. Every post, every appearance, every subtle choice was dissected, reinforcing a truth he could not escape. The world still demanded him, even as he sought to redefine himself. The applause that once validated his existence now felt distant, sometimes alienating, a reminder that legacy and presence are not the same. The days after retirement were both liberating and disorienting. For decades, Brady had lived by schedules, routines, and a relentless drive toward excellence. Without the structure of preparation, games, or film reviews, he confronted the unfamiliar, a life measured not by touchdowns or championships, but by the intangible, connection, purpose, and meaning. The discipline that had once propelled him to greatness now had to be redirected inward, towards self-reflection and personal growth. It was a new kind of training, one without clear metrics, one where victories were measured by presence rather than performance. Family, once navigated around the demands of a football career, became both anchor and mirror. Brady poured energy into rebuilding relationships strained by years of absence, recognizing that love requires more than intention. It requires consistency, attention, and emotional availability. Every conversation he had with his children, every shared moment with his spouse, became an exercise in reclaiming lost time. He confronted the truth that no amount of public admiration could compensate for private neglect, and that intimacy, unlike victory, cannot be earned with effort alone. It must be nurtured with attention. Social media and public scrutiny complicated this process. Every move was observed, every statement analyzed, every decision interpreted through the lens of fame. While his fans celebrated his legacy, they inadvertently imposed a weight he could no longer shoulder without the clarity of purpose football once provided. The paradox was inescapable. He was celebrated for his achievements, yet those same achievements had created the very space that demanded repair. He had become both idolized and isolated, revered and unmoored. Even his remarkable physical condition, once central to his identity, was reframed in this new reality. The body that carried him through grueling seasons, countless games, and decades of exertion now became a vessel for resilience and longevity, not performance. Maintaining health was no longer about dominance or validation. It was about being present, experiencing life fully, and honoring the sacrifices of the past. Each disciplined workout became both a reminder of past triumphs and a promise to care for the self that had been deferred. Internally, Brady faced profound psychological and emotional challenges. Identity, long intertwined with football, required reconstruction. Who was he without the sport that had defined him? How could he measure purpose when external metrics no longer existed? These questions were neither simple nor temporary. They were persistent companions, forcing him to confront vulnerability, solitude, and the reality that legacy does not equate to fulfillment. The paradox of achievement became clear. One can accomplish everything and still feel incomplete if the foundation of identity is fragile. Yet amid this struggle, there was a growing sense of possibility. Brady began to recognize that the skills honed through decades of dedication, focus, discipline, resilience, could guide him in building a life defined by presence and meaning. Small victories, previously overlooked, became central. Shared laughter with his children, quiet moments of reflection, acts of mentorship, and experiences that required neither competition nor validation. These victories were quieter, subtler, but no less profound. They represented mastery over a new kind of arena, one where the opponent is fear, isolation, and unexamined regret. At 48, Tom Brady's story is both tragic and redemptive. The brilliance and success that defined his public life are undeniable, yet the private challenges, loneliness, the weight of expectation, and the search for purpose are equally defining. The tragedy is not in failure, but in the cost of success, in the realization that the greatest victories often come with sacrifices invisible to the world. And yet, the opportunity for reconciliation, growth, and authentic connection remains, signaling that even after the highest peaks, there is room to learn, to heal, and to redefine what it means to win. Brady's journey illustrates a universal truth, that achievement without presence is incomplete, that legacy without connection is hollow, and that even the greatest among us must navigate the quiet, challenging terrain of the human heart. At 48, he continues this path, balancing past triumphs with present awareness, public adulation with private reconciliation, and ambition with the profound, subtle victories that define a life fully lived.